NFL Week 5 coming up next. I wanted to bring in football guru, he's founder of NFL Spin Zone, also NFL Network contributor, Russell Baxter. Russell, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great because we got football season, so we're finally past that 4-week mark, so we kind of at least have an idea of what we're looking at. I wanted to start with the Cardinals, though, because I'm watching that game on Thursday night, and I feel like every time I've seen the Cardinals this year, I keep getting back to there's so much talent on this team, but it seems like this team is still not fully gelled together, especially on defense.
Well, I'm kind of the polar opposite on that. I think they have talent, but at the same time, I thought there were some disturbing signs at the end of last year, Josh. And I know Tyrann Mathieu got hurt, but they did not play well down the stretch. Now, when I say down the stretch, it was very odd, and I'd have to go back and look and see if it's ever happened. When you play back-to-back home games, you win one by 30 and then lose one by 30. I think people forget that they beat the Packers handily. Sacked Aaron Rodgers 8 times, had 9 sacks in the game, and a week later lost at home to Seattle 36-6. Squeaked by the divisional playoff game in overtime, gave up the Hail Mary at the end of the game, got blown out in the NFC title game, did not look sharp for whatever reason, and whatever you want to put into preseason football, but it was a very uneven preseason for them. And Carson Palmer, when we did see him, got off to the rough start against New England, played poor defensively, especially in the first half, took the lead. Special teams let him down. Special teams let him down against Buffalo. This is a team that has not played well. And I know they've got talent on the team, but there seems to be something missing. And when your quarterback, and then you're very dependent on that quarterback, as the Cardinals were last year, and he plays poorly, and he's played poorly for a while now hurt. Now Drew Stanton comes in. This is a team that is not clicking on all cylinders in the least.
Do you think the Cardinals really need to start looking ahead to maybe getting a new quarterback, seeing what's going on with Carson Palmer?
Well, not now, not right now. They got to close the deal with the season. Their season's far from over, but, there's certainly some concerns there. And they would have to be looking in that direction anyway, Josh. Carson Palmer was the first overall pick in the 2003 draft, not the 2013 draft.
Sure.
He's got a lot of miles on him, and he's had some severe injuries. So, much like the Jets when they opted to do the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing, that was a team that had to look down the road for a quarterback. They took Christian Hackenberg in the second round. Same thing with the Cowboys, taking Dak Prescott in the fourth round. Tony Romo's been around since 2003. So, you got to start addressing that position for the future. Like I said, there's not much about the Cardinals can do about it now, but they have certainly not played well going back to late last year, and they've kind of picked up where they left off.
Let's move over to the NFC East. Last year, they referred to the NFC least, and now this year you have every team that's either at 500 or above 500 at the quarter point of the season. What do you attribute that to?
Well, first off, it's early. Second off, every team tried to address its defense in the offseason. The Giants spent a lot of money on their defense, played pretty well the first 2 games, so-so the last couple of games. I don't think they played all that bad against Minnesota, but they did manage to give up a 12-point lead against the Redskins at home and lost that game. Washington's defense still looks like it's a mess. Dallas's defense is not that great, but they're keeping it off the field with their running game. And the best offseason acquisition that the Eagles made this year was getting Jim Schwartz. I know Carson Wentz has been terrific, and I will not downplay anything they're doing. They haven't turned over the football in their first 3 games. But how's this for a little perspective, Josh? In 3 games, and I don't care who they played because I didn't care who they played last year, and look how poor they were defensively.
Right.
This idea of this, they played this, but this isn't college football. This is professional football. So that when the people start, they haven't played anybody, that's just silly. But think about this for a second. 3 games, giving up 27 points total. Last year, in 8 of their last 10 games, they gave up at least 27 points.
Yeah, and the Cardinals just gave up 21 points to the 49ers. So it shows you that it doesn't matter who you play. You still have to go out and execute each and every week.
Well, yeah. I mean, this like I said, one of the things I laugh about all the time is this looking to the schedule, they're going to get well. This is not how this league works, okay?
Right, it's a week-to-week league.
It is a week-to-week league, and we kind of dump on the Patriots' mantra of one game at a time. And anytime a coach says one game at a time, let me talk about the hypocrisy we go through. Anytime a coach, or most times when a coach says one game at a time, what is the popular consensus? Oh, cliche, boring, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then they lose a game to a team that, quote-unquote, they're supposed to win. What's the first thing out of everybody's mouth?
Oh, they weren't prepared. They looked past them. They looked ahead in the schedule.
Looking ahead. Okay, so, don't give me the Billy Martin light beer commercials, I feel strongly both ways. Okay? All right? So it is one game at a time. Why are the Patriots as successful as they are? Why are they consistent as they are? Because they plan week to week. They have a plan, okay? You don't get 15 straight winning seasons, as and this could be 16 if they continue to play well, okay? You don't have double-digit wins for 13 years in a row just because of a few whatevers, okay? They plan out. That's why the Brady thing, I think, was overblown. I'm not saying they didn't miss Tom Brady, but the idea that this is a team that plans game to game, situational football. Their situation for the first 4 weeks, Josh, was no Tom Brady, and they did pretty damn well without him. So,
absolutely.
Some of these teams, we get it in our minds that they're automatically to be good, so if they drop a game early, all of a sudden they're not as good as we think they are. And, listen, I understand all that stuff, but listen, power rankings are fun. There are no real power rankings in the NFL because there's actually a conclusion to the season.
Speaking with Russell Baxter, you've seen him on NFL Network's Good Morning Football. He's also the founder of NFL's Spin Zone. Russell, I want to ask you about the Eagles. Another question real quick before we kind of do a whip around the NFL. You mentioned that Jim Schwartz is the Eagles' best offseason acquisition. How much credit should we give to Doug Peterson, a rookie head coach who was willing to bring in an experienced, strong personality like Jim Schwartz onto his staff?
Well, listen, I mean, I think you have to go from the GM, Howie Roseman on, okay? He ridded himself of the Chip Kelly regime. Not the deals that he made. And remember, he traded for Byron Maxwell, and he signed Byron Maxwell. He traded for Kiko Alonso. He signed DeMarco Murray. They got rid of all that. They brought in a rookie coach. To me, the thing that's been remarkable about Carson Wentz was the little time he saw in the preseason. Okay, I think everybody agreed that he was talented. You're not the second pick in the draft if you're not talented and somebody hasn't seen you. It wasn't like one team, the Eagles said, well, we're going to take him for. Him and Jared Goff were a ping pong session about who was first and who was second.
Right.
But the fact that Carson got hurt in the preseason and cracked the ribs, and then it was going to be Bradford, and then it was going to be Chase Daniel. The uncertainty, and for them to come out and look as sharp as they had offensively, I think it's been a real credit to Peterson, but the whole organization in general. It shows you if you're not set from top to bottom, from front office to player to coach, you're not going to be safe. You can't be poor in one of those three areas. I don't care as far as I'm concerned, give the greatest coach and the greatest players, but if your front office is poor, eventually it's going to catch up with you, and combine them any which way you want, Josh. The Eagles had a plan. Like I said, they put it into effect. Howie Roseman regaining power. Chip Kelly was doing something, frankly, wasn't qualified to do because I think for a lot of people these days in the salary cap era, to do both is difficult. To be a personnel guy when you've only been in the league 3 years, how the hell can you know the personnel around the league if you've been in college football for most of your life?
Right. It's a totally different world, the NFL and college football.
Listen, if you're just going by Rod, just do the math. Okay, there's roughly, 1,800 players on NFL rosters, correct?
Right.
Okay, how on earth would a man That's the difference between Chip Kelly and, say, a Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, who was in the NFL and then went to college and then came back. Chip Kelly was his initial exposure in the NFL. So how could he have any semblance? I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying too much too soon for a guy who was not NFL savvy, okay? I mean, there are coaches around the league, if you give them power, you can understand it because they've bounced around the teams in the league.
Right.
But if you're not in the league at all, how can you possibly know the players in it?
I agree 100%. I want to do a couple quick hits on a couple teams before we let you go. You mentioned front offices and having their issues. I look at the Colts organization. All I see is a general manager who's basically blaming Andrew Luck's contract for why he can't team build, and I see a head coach in Chuck Pagano, who's a former defensive coordinator, who really has been underwhelming in elevating the play of his defense.
Yeah, I see all that too, and I also see a quarterback that makes far too many mistakes as well. And so I'm not going to leave him of any of the blame. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. Interceptions are one thing. Fumbling, to me at least, is different. And if you sense that you're going to get hit and sense you've got to learn how to protect the football, I have less of a problem with Andrew Luck throwing interceptions than I do fumbling as much as he does and losing those fumbles. Okay? He had his, 2-game stretch where he got sacked, lost a fumble, and was returned for a touchdown. The Chargers did it to him. The Broncos did it to him. Okay? Same thing with Mark Sanchez. He throws a lot of picks. He also fumbles a lot. He doesn't protect the football, okay? So there's a lot to blame. Now, to Ryan Grigson's credit, this offseason, he went out and drafted 4 offensive linemen because that's another area they haven't addressed.
Right.
And I think the mistake that Ryan Grigson has made, and it's not, I don't think it's money, they haven't drafted well defensively. If you go back to Bill Polian's early days with the Colts, okay, when he got Peyton Manning, he had all those he got Edger and James and all that, okay? He tried to build the team defensively through free agency. Chad Bratsky, other guys like that. It didn't work. Finally, Bill started hitting some guys in the draft, like Bob Sanders, and then getting some undrafted free agents. Cato, I'm trying to remember if Cato Jr. was drafted or undrafted. He started to hit guys, smaller guys who could play Tony Dungy's defense, guys who maybe didn't have long shelf life, but he was able to replace them constantly and so on. Ryan Grigson needs to have a defensive draft like he had an offensive draft in 2012, because it wasn't just Andrew Luck. It was Dwayne Allen. It was T.Y. Hilton. It was Kobe Fleener. It was Vic Howard at the time. I know he's not in football anymore. But remember, they got basically like 5 starters in that 2012 draft on offense. On defense, he's tried to do free agency. He traded for Vontae Davis. He's plugged holes. He needs to do what the Packers did one year, where they drafted their first 6 guys were all on defense. Something like the Bears this year drafted 6 out of 9 guys on defense. He hasn't had that same success. So I agree with you. Don't blame the fact that you can't spend money to get defensive players. You don't have to spend a lot of money on defensive players if you draft them properly.
Got a couple more quick questions for you. What's going on with the Raiders defense?
Well, I did a piece on them this week and so on. I mean, they added Bruce Irvin, they added Sean Smith, they added Reggie Nelson. Reggie Nelson is starting to look like Reggie Nelson, leads the team in tackles, already has 2 takeaways, had 10 takeaways last year. Sean Smith has really had his problems at cornerback. David Amerson, people continue to throw at him. He continues to knock down passes. He's got 8 knockdown passes in 4 games. Bruce Irvin has 2 sacks. He leads the team. And where is that fearsome pass rush we were all waiting for? Josh, how's this for a little perspective? Played 4 games. I know the Raiders are 3-1, but they can't continue to play the kind of defense they're playing, and it's not going to sustain it. You can't win 28-27 or 35-34 every week.
No, it's not sustainable.
Yes. Just for a fun stat, I find this interesting. In 4 games, the Raiders had 5 sacks. Last year in Denver, Khalil Mack had 5 sacks.
Wow.
I mean, he was Big Mac that day.
Yeah.
But they had 5 sacks in 4 games. They're giving I mean, listen, the Raiders are entertaining as hell. They've scored 108 points. They've given up 106. What more do you want?
Right. Exactly. Well, I said earlier this year, to me, they're turning into the cardiac kids this year, because it seems like at the end of every game, they're scrambling around trying to win.
Well, absolutely. I mean, but listen, they've given up 34 points, 35 points. I mean, held Tennessee to 10, okay? But last week, the Ravens, 27 points. Again, you can't get a steady dose, do that. It is unsustainable. And so far for them, the one thing, listen, they played New Orleans, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Baltimore. They've gotten out of there 3-1. Now they start with some divisional foes. Okay, I believe they get San Diego this week and Kansas City next. That's where is going to be the big difference. Last year, they were okay in the division. They were 3-3. They won at Denver. You will remember when Oswald was the game we just mentioned. But they haven't beaten the Broncos in Oakland in a bit. They swept the Chargers last year, but they got swept by the Chiefs. If you're going to get by in that division, and listen, everybody's chasing the Broncos again. Nobody wanted to talk about the Broncos in the offseason. Is it like they're just not going to repeat, okay, because they lost so many people? Well, they're doing something right. They're 4-0, and their defense looks pretty fierce.
Yeah, exactly. Russell, I always appreciate you joining me. He writes for NFL Spin Zone. He also seen him on Good Morning Football and NFL Network. And, follow him on Twitter at Bax Football Guru. Always a great follow. Always appreciate your insights, my friend.
No problem, Josh. We'll talk to you soon.